Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. I'm sitting here today with Brandon Harle of Wenatchee High School. And Brandon, you sent me an email. And so this is how I'm going to introduce you. You sent me an email and your signature card says you're a social studies teacher, senior class advisor, yearbook advisor, podcast instructor, media production, and TSA advisor.
Right.
What do you do in your spare time?
Not much right now. It's actually less than I used to do. I also used to be an assistant football coach, so
that's what I thought I saw somewhere. It was you were football. Okay, so you've streamlined the workload just a little bit.
Yeah, what a little bit.
So it's been a long time since I've been in high school. I mean, just look at me. But what is a TSA advisor? Because that makes me think you're training kids to work at SeaTac Airport.
Right.
And so what's TSA first off?
Right. It's an unfortunate connected acronym, right? TSA is the Technology School Association.
Okay.
So part of a career and technical education, the programs that we all offer in Washington State have to have some form of a professional organization for a club. So
okay.
For podcasts and media production, our engineering teacher, Doug Merrill, our forensics teacher, Lindsay Hildorfer, we're all TSA advisors. That's part of our requirements for CTE, career and technical education.
Now, unfortunately, now I'm down the rabbit hole and we're not even going to talk about you. You have a forensic advisor?
Yeah. With our Washington State is really aggressive and facing on the issue head on about like pathway issues, students that are having kind of like ideas about what they want to go into for post high school. And our pathway requirements, students are supposed to kind of steer their way towards classes that will potentially lead them to a career after high school.
Okay.
So our career and technical education director, Jake Bolt, has offered a swath of different classes that lead kids to all sorts of opportunities. And forensics was added last year, and Lindsay's done a great job with that. There have been some faux crime scenes that students have to come and analyze, and I don't really know that much about her particular course, but the TSA aspect of it, she'll bring a group of kids to one of the TSA conventions, and they'll have a mock scene that they don't know anything about beforehand, and they have to try to use what they've learned in class to solve that particular event.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. So as I've said before on episodes, I typically have a conversation with my guests, you get on the phone, talk for a little while. And one of the things that I said to you when we were on the phone was that my very layman's view of schools is that they're very much within the box. Mm-hmm. And so I was really, when I heard about this podcasting program and your students, which we're going to get to, I promise you, I thought how cool that is that that's outside the box. And now you're telling me the same school has a forensics program, which, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, that's really outside the box to me. That's like crazy. That's very cool. So
yeah, we have a lot going on. I really don't know how much the average person knows just how many things a big school like ours has in terms of student opportunity and just the wide variety of classes and opportunities. One of our pathways that's within our social studies department now is a law and justice. So we have mock trial, constitutional law, and that, even though it's social studies band, it is within the context of career and technical education, because obviously law and justice is a career opportunity. Those kids get to compete at state and national conventions, and we are incredibly fortunate. We have a former California State Supreme Court lawyer who wanted to get out of that, and he came to be a social studies teacher at Wenatchee High School. So wow. That's a one-off. That's not something that's super common to have a, a certified California lawyer teaching law and justice.
That's crazy. All right. So last question about Wenatchee High School in general. I know we'll come back to it in some ways, but this is my last. So you mentioned big high school. What is the approximate attendance? You know, how many students go there?
Well, we're a weekend, so I don't know if I have the most updated, but I think it's pretty safe to say we always go with 2,000, and that could be a little bit more depending on the count, but at the minimum, it's 2,000. It might be a little bit higher than that, 2,100.
So last year in the graduating class of 2023, about how many graduated?
460-ish, somewhere in there.
So when you went to high school, how many kids did you graduate with?
I graduated from Wenatchee High School in 1993, and we had about 265, I think.
Yeah, so my school that I graduated in 1980 in Tacoma was about 240. Ooh. So 400 and some kids. That's just. I knew the school was big. I didn't know it was. Yeah, I didn't know it was quite that big.
On my list of things you mentioned, I'm the senior class advisor, and I've done that for 17 years. And that role really is just about getting the graduation ceremony and kids going through that. So I can tell you that last year's class was one of the smaller. We've seen this downward trend. So we've had as many as 600. Wow. So we've had a couple that have been lower than 460. But yeah, it's all over the place.
Okay. So your backstory. So you went into Wenatchee High School. So you grew up in Wenatchee.
Yep.
Where'd you go to college at?
I went to Wenatchee Valley College, then transferred to Central and finished out my social studies degree there.
Okay. And then was the plan always to come back to Wenatchee? Like, see, like my story, grew up in Tacoma. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I went to Central myself, and I wanted to stay in Ellensburg. I loved Ellensburg. I still hold it. My bio says it's my freshman year was the best 6 years of my life. So I had a really good time in Ellensburg, but I really like that town. Was your plan to come back, or were you thinking about going elsewhere?
I knew I tell my students when they ask me, I allow them to interview me. They always ask, when did you know you wanted to be a social studies teacher? And I was fortunate that I had some really powerful and impactful social studies teachers in particular. And I can vividly remember sitting in room 201 my senior year, kind of contemplating, what is it that I want to do? Teacher, sports medicine, something else. I don't really know. But knowing that we had this conversation on a day, we were talking about China. I remember my teacher, and I looked around the class and everybody was having a good time. We were enjoying ourselves while still learning. And this mentor of mine, it just that moment was like, I want to be a social studies teacher at Wenatchee High School. And I was one of the few people that go to college who didn't change his major. So when I went to Central, when I finished up those classes, I had to student teach, and I student taught over at Eastmont, which was something that I didn't want to do. But it ended up being the best thing that I could have done. My master teacher over there was somebody who I am still deeply indebted to in terms of who he is as a person. I aligned myself. I saw him like, that's the guy. I want to be like him when I teach. So, and then it took me almost 9 years to get a full-time social studies job after that. So, okay. I taught 4 years in the business department here at Wenatchee High School from 2001 to 2005, teaching a variety of courses that I wasn't overly excited about. I wanted to be a social studies teacher. And after 4 years of that, I left. I left education for a year. So, okay. Paths changed. Yeah, I came back. I taught a year later. I came back and I taught a year in Chelan at the high school up there. Okay. Rode the link bus up to Chelan every day for a year, and that was an incredibly just powerful experience for me to get my kind of open my eyes to a smaller school and a community that I'd only been on the peripheral of as a tourist or somebody who had visited up there as a lot as a kid. But and then in 2007, I came back here.
Okay, that's what a great story.
Yeah.
Let's talk podcasting, because that was the original reason we're
right
here. So I'll just tell you what I know, and then you're gonna fill in the blanks. So I think I saw it on Facebook, and I think somebody shared an article from the Wenatchee World about a Wenatchee high school student who won an honorable mention in a podcast contest held by the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was amazing. Then I did a little bit of research, and I saw that he was in a class at Wenatchee High School, which kind of made me go, "That's really cool." And then your name popped up. I actually looked you up on LinkedIn. I messaged you on LinkedIn. You were kind enough to respond back. You may be regretting that now, but here we are. I want to know, how did this program get started? What was the root of this? And like, because once again, I come at this with the idea that schools, public schools in general, are like tied into this little box regarding testing.
Right.
How did this podcasting program get started?
So let's, I got to think about the dates. So it's fall of 2023. So it was the spring of 2022. I was the department head for our social studies department for several years, and I had been imagining a way that we could recreate the courses that we taught in social studies to be a little bit more broadly appealing to our students, in particular, student body that is a very diverse student body. And the traditional is, like a world studies kind of course, a U.S. history course, and then your senior year, you take a contemporary issues or civics course, and that rinse repeat over and over again. And I felt with our depth of knowledge and so many of our people that have these life experiences, we should be able to have courses that tended to be a little more unique. And one of the things that I wanted to try to do was implement more project-based, kind of students could share the things that they learned. And I had created, I'm very passionate about genealogy and family history, and I used a lot of history of my own through that means to share with my students primary source documents, historical events, and all these little minute details that you can actually be a part of, even though you might not think about it, through tracing your family history. And social studies doesn't have a big budget, and we don't have the means to create, like, I wanted the kids to be able to do what we're doing, like record a video or an audio story to share with their family or friends. So I went and visited with our career and technical education director, Jake Buoltz, about kind of equipment they have, what kind of options would that look like? How could we create like an audio lab that students from social studies could go potentially use? And he was very great about it. He said, let me think about it. Let me get back to you. So he came back to me a couple of weeks later and he said, here's what I'm thinking. How do you feel about being the person who creates a podcasting class? Wasn't exactly what I asked for. It wasn't anything that I had really thought about in terms of that kind of a change in the way that I was doing it. But it was exciting, the idea that here's a guy who saw enough in me to say, here, why don't you lead this? I had never had any experience with audio or podcasting on my own. Like most people, I think COVID hit and I kind of got into the podcast groove. It was a nice way to fill the day and hear some great stories and follow some people that I enjoyed listening to, but I didn't know anything about it. So he offered me a chance to study some of those things. I took some classes through the University of California, Berkeley School, Graduate School of Journalism, their Advanced Media Institute. And I learned so much. It was so enjoyable to build kind of my knowledge base and to create this course. And we ran it. We scheduled them. The kids schedule several months in advance before the school gets out. So we had well more than enough to run a course that for last year. And starting in the fall of 2022, we ran with it. And like anything, it's been pretty shaky getting it off the ground right away. It's one thing about having a knowledge base, knowing how to teach, putting them all together, finding the means of instruction. I had all the equipment. My Mr. Buoltz was awesome about finding us the equipment, letting me purchase equipment that was very much tied to industry standards, the things that we used in the courses that I took. And we built the course from there. And it still is a work in progress. But the way that I wanted to, I imagine it, we have an incredible sports medicine program here at Wenatchee High School, a nationally recognized one. And in my mind, I thought, I want to do for high school podcasting what our sports med program has done for that program. I want kids to be able to get notice at the national, state level for what they create, and maybe potentially earn them some scholarships, or steer them towards a career in audio engineering, podcasting, whatever it might be, whatever media field they're interested in.
That's very impressive.
I don't know. I was that the long route?
Well, no, I think so. What my takeaway from that is that you put in the effort. But I do have one question. So you said the kids register early, so the course wasn't ready when the kids were registering for it. Where was it? You were kind of.
It's just advertised. Yeah, with my director's help, he's like, get the word out, because we know that kids are selecting their courses by February for the following year, and with 2,000 students and the way that our classes are constructed, it is a maze of madness. Our assistant principal, Ricardo Iniguez, he runs that, and that is, it's a huge process. So we have to know that early. Sure. And I think by advertising it and being a teacher who's been here for a while and has, I think, earned a reputation of being pretty adept at working with students, we wanted to get the word out. And the initial numbers were higher, but you got to make sure you have enough to fill one class, and because kids can say, hey, that sounds cool. They put it down as one of their picks, but then later go, you know what, that doesn't fit into my schedule. So the numbers always drop down a little bit, but we had more than 30 signed up initially. So there we go. And we had 30 to start the year last year.
Okay. So you had 30 students to start the program. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing you said when we were on the phone, or at least I think you said, so I'm going to ask for some clarity. This was open to all grades. It wasn't just, so it was open to all grades.
Yep.
At Wenatchee High School, how many of the classes are available to all years?
Well, I think for the most part, all of our career and technical education programs are open 9 through 12.
Okay.
There's some that have the advanced component to it. Like, for instance, like you have intro to welding and then advanced welding.
Right.
So those wouldn't be open to ninth graders. Mm-hmm. Some of our English and science and math courses tend to be more aligned to grade level. Okay. You take sophomore English as a sophomore, which makes sense. Yeah. Right. Our social studies, we have tried to kind of open that up a little bit. So we have some freshmen now taking some of our social studies classes. And we're allowing for more of that. But for the most part, CTE, PE, music, I think we have our sports med program, which is part of our CTE, our art programs, our foreign language. Those are all open to all grade levels.
Okay. So your class is open to all 4 grades. Mm-hmm. Your initial class, what was kind of the mixture? Mostly juniors and seniors? Was it freshmen and sophomores?
No, it was all 4 grades. Okay. Being the first time, what's interesting, Cade, one of our students who was recognized for his podcast, he's a freshman. Okay. My son, who's a freshman, was in that class. My daughter, who was a senior, was in that class. We had a mix of all 4, okay, and all students from lots of different kind of backgrounds. So it was very eclectic.
Had you ever had the experience of teaching your kids before, as far as being a teacher, not being a parent, but being a teacher?
My daughter, I had her for AP US history her junior year, but that was coming out of COVID. It was just kind of a funky, didn't have a usual feel. So yeah, my daughter was in my class the year before.
Okay. All right. I don't know. My kids are great, I don't know that I could have been their teacher. I don't know.
Well, my wife's a 7th grade teacher, and she had my daughter in class,
Okay.
but she didn't have my son. She knew that wouldn't be a dynamic that would be very functional, not in a negative way, but she just loves all over him. And definitely when my daughter and her came home, they would part ways. They spend a lot of time through the day with each other, and then when they get home, the last thing they want to do is more of that.
Got it. All right. I shouldn't laugh at that, but the way you described it was kind of cute, actually, to be honest with you. Okay.
So, it was very like sitcom-esque at times, watching them walk in the door, just go opposite directions.
So this is the first year you've run the course. I'm sure everything went flawlessly. There was you already alluded to that things weren't what you expected, but right. I'm going to put you on the spot. Now this is where I'm going to start asking you very pointed questions that may or may not be possible to answer. I'll get that right out of the way, but
sure.
What did you not see coming that happened? Either good or bad. I mean, was there something that you're like, I would have never thought about that?
Well, I was really intentional about the way that I titled the course. I wanted students or people that were interested in podcasting not to think that they were just going to come in and it was just going to be the Joe Rogan podcast.
Okay.
The title of the course is Intro to Podcast Production and Audio Storytelling. So what I didn't expect was some of the students who came in who really, I think, thought that it was just, hey, we're going to, for 86 minutes every other day, listen to podcasts. And, kind of figure out how the tech works. And then we'll interview some people. And it's, I guess in my mind, I wasn't really prepared for that. Okay. There's always the tech hurdles. Our students all have Chromebooks in the Wenatchee school district, or at least in the Wenatchee High School.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the Zoom audio recorders that we use, that's a pretty common device, don't integrate as easily with Chromebooks, where most either Mac or PC based have software that kind of help with that. So we had to work around some of those issues. Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody that comes to a podcast has a different interpretation of what that is. Well, when you sit down and you listen to podcasts, sometimes it's just to learn something. Sometimes it's just to have a laugh. Sometimes it's to hear an interview. Mm-hmm. So what I think I wasn't prepared for was the fact that students tended to have like one view of what a podcast was. And that was different than what I was hoping to engage them with.
Okay. So when you're sitting there in September and students are filling into the room, first week of school type of thing, did you ask them, were most of the kids in the classroom, were they podcast listeners?
I would say probably not. About 50-50.
About 50-50. Okay.
I mean, I think most of them had listened to one before, but I wouldn't say that all of them were consistent listeners.
Okay.
My daughter, who's in the class, she was going into her senior year, so she had started to kind of like find some ones that kind of connected to her personality. I talked to some other students who, they listen to the big ones that they would tune in for sports reasons, but nobody was really an avid podcast listener. I didn't get that sense. And there were certainly some that had only I'd listen to a couple from time to time, but no.
All right. See, I was hoping you were going to say the whole class listened to Exploring Washington State. Just, just kidding.
That's one of the things that I've recognized. I mean, there is an unlimited amount of podcasts out there. Oh. It is endless. You can find anything. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I was trying to press upon my students was there's something out there for all of you. Let's find it. I mean, it is there.
Right. Well, one of the things that I think is really kind of fascinating is now when I was a kid, and go back, I could have interviewed my grandfather using a cassette recorder, right? Mm-hmm. I could have recorded that and I could have had him tell all his stories, the verbal history, of his life. and I didn't, but I could. The technology was there, but now, I mean, what are they using? Zoom H1Ns, the little handheld ones, right?
Yep.
Okay,
That's the
and you
common
can
one.
use
Yeah.
your cell phone. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so much. The technology has changed so much that you could, if you were so inclined,
Hmm.
you could sit down and record conversations with family members
Hmm.
and store them, use them, chop them up into I'm not trying to say you should profit off your family. That's not what I mean. But you can tell those family stories, and you can share those family stories very easily.
Right.
So it's kind of a fascinating that aspect of it's fascinating.
Right.
The other thing, there's so many other things you can do, but the other thing you can do is you can, like I'm doing. I when I started this, which this podcast was a product of the pandemic, because our website was getting, hate mail's too strong, but during the lockdown, a large number of people that follow Explore Washington State, whether the website or our social media, they actually think we're the state of Washington. And so we were getting some pushback from people saying, "Hey, you've locked us down. You said we can't do this. How come you're telling me to go to this restaurant or go on this hike?" And so it was like, well, wait a second. This is kind of what we do changed during that period of time. Well, I didn't want to shut the whole thing down, so the idea was, well, let's just start talking to people and see what happens. I had no idea that I'd be doing this 3+ years later and still enjoying it. In fact, I probably enjoy it more now than I did then, if I'm being honest, because I'm more comfortable doing it now.
Sure.
And I've had some fascinating conversations with just like I'm talking to you. I had no idea a week ago, I think, let's say 10 days ago, safely 10 days ago, I had no idea that Wenatchee High School had a podcasting program, much less thought I'd be talking to you today. Or I've talked to, fairly well-known people. I've punched way above my weight for access that I wouldn't have gotten had I just sent a blind email to the CEO of a company saying, "Hey, I'd like to ask you questions." It would have never gone anywhere. But right. I can say, "Hey, I have a podcast," and all of a sudden the doors open. It's very interesting. And I don't think it matters that I'm my age or 14. I think your students can, if they want to interview somebody, if they approach it well, there's not one right way. So I don't want to say right, like there's only one way, right. But if they approach it, their likelihood is pretty good. Right. I think that they can have that conversation with somebody no matter where that person is. We're not sitting in the same room right now. We're using technology. I mean, we could, because we're actually in the same. So one of the rare episodes where I'm in the same town as my guest. But, I don't have to be in the same room. And the technology is cheap. It's easy to use. It's pretty reliable. It still needs a good internet connection, but that's pretty common most places. And I think it's a great way for kids, not just kids, but people to learn storytelling, people to learn how to share something that's important to them and interesting to them. So walk me through, I'm a student in your class. What do I have to do to get a good grade from you? What's the requirements of the course? What are you having the students do? What's the coursework like?
Well, like most of our courses, we always want to make sure we start off our kids with some kind of an entry task. For the podcasting class, I pick one of the ones that has been an award winner for students, either from the New York Times or NPR student podcast contest over the last 6 years. So when they enter class, for the first 5 or 6 minutes, they'll listen to one of those and give some feedback. We'll talk about that. Those are easy, quick points to kind of get them focused in on what we're doing for that day. And then we have just whatever particular podcast we're working on. Being that it's project-based, we have a number of our podcasts that have due dates.
Okay.
So the NPR podcast is due in, I think, by the end of March. The New York Times one, I think, is by the first week of May.
Okay.
The organization you mentioned earlier, the Technical Student Association, the Washington State TSA, the one we compose, they're great because they come up with a prompt, and that prompt, everybody's got their own version of what they want to do. Last year was describe a product that high school students use every day. So that's pretty far reaching. And the kids had, there's parameters for each one. So for this course to be really project based, we have a lot of deadlines. You have to have this many interviews by this day. You have to have, we go over like copyright issues with regards to sound and music use.
Mm-hmm.
Some kids, we found some sites that kids use that allow for you to make your own sounds and music. I think I had a couple lessons last year where they had to do some Foley sounds to reenact the actual the sounds that are made that they could put into their video or their podcasts.
Right.
So to get a good grade, though, I mean, it's really about, did you fulfill the requirements of this particular podcast? Did you do it in a way that allows for the listener to listen to it easily and structurally sound? Every other kid in the class after the due date has to listen to all the other students, and they get a grade it. That way they give me the feedback based on that, and I use my grade, but their grade can be impacted by what the other students also give in. Students are kind of finicky, I don't like anything about that topic, so this podcast isn't my favorite. Like, that's fine. That's not what we're trying to do, So it could be. I had a couple kids do. We've had, as a football coach, we've had some students who have gone on to play college football, and we're lucky enough to have some students who have played at the University of Washington. So one of my students, who's the son or the brother of Cade and the son of the head football coach, called a couple of the guys that University of Washington had that are Wenatchee grads, and so did a spring preview for the Husky football team last spring.
Okay.
He fulfilled the requirements. He had 3 interviews. He put in sound that was non-copyrighted. He found some sounds like the Husky barking in the background, and it's more about the skills than the actual podcasts themselves, because just like if somebody writes a paper, you don't agree with it, it's really about the structure of the paper. Did they do all the things that were required for that grade? And that's what the podcast has to be. The rubric that we have is, does it have these parts? Now, the skill and the talent, like, you said after 3 years, you're really comfortable. A lot of kids aren't comfortable right away hearing their own voice, making edits. I had one of the podcasts that was turned in. It was like a 10-minute podcast, and 9 minutes of it was their interview. Asking one question and letting the person they were interviewing talk.
Right.
And they threw some music in, like a little intro, and it didn't meet any of the requirements. So I punted it back to them and said, hey guys, you gotta, this isn't a podcast. This is a recording of somebody's answers that you asked them. And that takes time. I think that the idea that they want to just interview people and that's good enough is different than a storytelling aspect. You can have both,
right?
But you also have to, like you've learned, you have to have the skills to be able to communicate with people and talk to them. I mean, this is an interview without like a job offer at the end, right? I mean, it's a back and forth banter that takes practice, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you become.
Well, now I really don't want this to go down the technical rabbit hole, but I guess I'm going to have to ask a couple of technical questions. You said you're having the students edit. What are they using to edit? Because they're using Chromebooks, so they've got a little bit of limitation. So what software? I think I know the answer. I think I know what you're going. Well, I have an idea, but I'm curious. What are you having them edit with?
Okay, well, that was the thing. I guess I should have went, but you asked me a question. What was I not ready for? And I had done all the front end work. The class that I taught, we worked through it in Adobe Audition, which is an industry standard software, that's considered one of the top of the lines. But no Chromebooks run any of that stuff. And I have a few computers in the class that we purchased that students had access to, and we gave them full access to Adobe Edition.
Okay.
The problem is like Adobe Edition is like calculus, right? And if somebody comes in only knowing how to do addition and subtraction, and you say, go after it, and here's a device that doesn't really speak to its language, it just puts all this. So I wasn't really ready for that. I had high expectations. And so with some help from the students, we found a web-based system called Podcastle. Is that the one that you were?
No, it's not. No, I've never heard of that. Okay.
Yeah. So podcastle.ai our students all have accounts that allow them to sign in through like a kind of a Google attachment, our Wenatchee schools accounts. So they offer a free plan. You can obviously purchase a bigger plan that offers more bells and whistles, but we don't really need that. The Podcastle one allows them to render a little bit of sound out, create different layers of their audio so they can do their voice, their music, transition sounds, whatever they want. So it's all web-based. So, and because our students use a Google-based web system, we all have Google Drive, which is basically their hard drive. So they can take their audio files from their Zoom recorder, drop it in their Google Drive, and drag it over to Podcastle if they need to, and manipulate it that way.
Okay. I was thinking, there was two that popped to mind. I was wondering if it was Audacity, and that's a free tool that's quite popular. It's not calculus, but it's advanced algebra.
Okay.
Or Hindenburg, which is Hindenburg is more designed for journalists. It's designed to edit the spoken word. A lot of, like, if you have a Mac, a lot of people use GarageBand, and you can go crazy with GarageBand and add, I'll put a violin in here and you can have 32 tracks of music.
Right.
Hindenburg is designed more for storytelling, and
Gotcha.
it's not free, but I think that they have a fairly deeply discounted educational program. And it's pretty lightweight in the grand scheme of things. It's still, I mean, all software is heavy, but it's pretty lightweight. So those were the two I was thinking.
Okay.
Another one would be Descript. Have you heard of that?
No, I don't think I have. I'm writing them down. I think we came across Audacity. I haven't heard of Hindenburg. And then the third one you said was what?
Descript. And Descript is kind of a visual editor. You put the file in and it creates a transcript.
Oh, okay.
And you edit the transcript. So like, I want to cut out all the ums and ahs. So you just click and they're all gone. It's kind of cool. It's a non-destructive editor. A lot of interesting things. Now, the other thing with the advanced version of Descript is that you can record your own voice. And let's say I say something like, Wenatchee's playing Eastmont Friday nights, September 11th. And it was like, it was supposed to be December 12th. I can literally go in and cancel out 11, type in 12, and it'll say it in my voice. Which is kind of creepy Big Brother stuff, but it's kind of cool, for like a quick on the fly editing. And they've locked it down so you can't like upload Morgan Freeman's voice and all of a sudden have all your shows sound like Morgan Freeman or somebody like that, but it has to be you. Anyway, so you're having the students, you're walking them through all of this very specific, guidelines and all that. Now, okay, so you've mentioned two podcast contests. You've mentioned the New York Times and you mentioned NPR. We're going to give we're going to go back to that in a second, but how many of your students entered those competitions? Was that a requirement of the classes that they enter?
I wanted it to be a requirement, but because of such the broad knowledge, we had students that had never done anything with audio, to some that had a little bit of experience. Nobody had a lot.
Okay.
And because we're kind of limited, right? Students try to find somebody to interview about a certain topic, and you're a ninth grader. You can't drive to go interview somebody. Like you said, one of the things that I pushed towards the latter half of the year was let's find ways to connect to people. Let's email this person. Let's call this office and see if they can set up a time. We've created that opportunity for kids to find ways to try to connect with people. So that took a little bit of time to try to find a way to do. And because of that, not everybody had a product that met the kind of threshold that, that we wanted to submit.
Okay.
I had a handful of kids submit to both of them, and that was fine. So my hope was they would submit, but if it wasn't ready, I didn't want to waste their time or the good folks at NPR and the New York Times who had to listen to thousands of these anyway. Not to say that it wasn't about the effort. They learned still. But that was the hope. Yeah.
Okay. So the article that I saw was that you had a student win an honorable mention in the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I saw that and you and I spoke, you sent me another email and you had just found out that another student had won honorable mention in the NPR contest.
Yeah.
Let's talk about both of those. I've listened to both of those episodes.
Okay.
I thought that they were both really well done.
Yep.
How much of that can you walk me through? Those two students, what can we walk through what you think their workflow was to put these two episodes together?
Well, yeah, I can, a little bit of it. Of course, the first part of it is just with both NPR and the New York Times, it's wide open. You can be on any topic. NPR tends to also encourage students to pursue podcasts that deal with mental health issues that so many students are struggling with coming out of COVID. But it's such a literally anything. And, as I don't know if you were like that as a college student, you're like, all right, I can do it on anything. You're like, oh man, I can do it on anything. How do I narrow that down? So
I'm like that as an adult.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice option, but it also is kind of daunting because you really can go anywhere with it. So we sit down and we talk about some ideas that kids might have. And if certain students need more time to discuss like a topic, we can do that. But the clock's ticking. With Cade, his podcast called, I think it was the Crash at Sea, if I remember right. Let me see if I can see it here. Yeah, the Crash at Sea. I've known Cade since the day he was born. That story was one that I'd heard from his dad for 20 years. So when he told me, he's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this story. In my mind, it just was, that is great. Do that, because with just my mind went through all the sound editing he could do, the interviews that he could create. Cade had actually interviewed his dad, his uncle, and his grandpa, but had a phone call out to the Coast Guard. Like you said, you try to reach out to these people. And people want to I think it's pretty common. People want to help high school students, any students really,
sure,
if they can give them a few minutes of their time. So I don't think that the Coast Guard was ditching Cade on a call. It's just they're busy too, and so he put in a call to the Coast Guard outfit out of Portland. It's probably one of the busiest in the United States, if I remember hearing it right. The bar there, because he wanted to get some interviews like, hey, what do you do when a boat gets hit like this? What's the procedure? So I try to help them with some ideas, and then we'll do a couple of searches and look for some people maybe that they can talk to and interview. A lot of kids, and I wanted them to lean on kind of personal experiences. So the girls who did the Life Inside the Green band tent, when they told me that all three of them were band students, they were partnered up. They could work on groups of three, and that was fine. And they told me that they were going to do that. I was just so excited. And when I found out that later on that was also picked as a honorable mention, I was a little disappointed because I thought actually it had a better shot than just honorable mention, but I was so proud of them for getting that alone, because that story in and of itself, the green tent story, you could do many podcasts on how ugly that got here for the staff, and you heard it. Some of the interviews that people provided about the ugliness that we had here throughout phone calls and emails, and
I was really surprised, honestly. I was like,
and there's a lot more to it that people don't know about.
There's a part. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to link to both of the episodes so
Great. I appreciate that.
I want, so folks, if you're listening to this episode, I'm just going to say pause right now, go to the show notes page, go listen to these two episodes so that you understand more clearly what we're discussing, because they're both excellent stories, and they're both 6 minutes long. I mean, they're both very short, and that's part of it. The NPR one had to be less than, was it 5 or 6 minutes? It was
the
very
NPR
tight.
one, I think, is 6 or so. The New York Times one is 5 minutes.
Yeah,
exact. So if you have any lagging airtime, any intro, kids were learning to cut that like milliseconds to
right.
Because if it's a tenth of a second longer than 5, they just delete it. They won't listen to it.
Wow. Yeah. So, but see, you got to learn. That's those are standards in jobs when you have, no matter what the thing is. So I did read that Cade doesn't know that he's going to stick with podcasting. I think that's paraphrasing it fairly accurately. Is he in the class this year?
No. It's still just one course. We offered we want to offer an advanced podcast where we do something similar, where we have like a weekly interview, where a group of kids can sit down with a guest and talk about what's going on in the district or whatever it might be. But no, right now it's only a one-off. You can take the class one time and then you got to move on.
Okay. So it's one and done. So, all right. So this year, it's early on, but how many students do you have for the class this year?
Just had the class. I'm thinking probably about 25.
25.
I think that's maybe, about that.
Fairly equally distributed amongst all 4 grades?
Not as many this time. I think there's less seniors this year.
Okay.
More sophomores and junior heavy. Yeah. Less freshmen, less seniors, and more the other groups.
Okay. So this year, what changes based on your first year? You got through it. You survived. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
This year, what changes are you making to improve the class?
A couple of things. One, I want to focus more on the actual skill of having these kind of conversations. Working on asking better questions and not being afraid to reach out and contact people that are willing to maybe give you a few minutes of their time. So many kids just kind of defaulted to, I'm going to go ask this teacher and interview this teacher again. And that teacher, maybe had the same prep period as my class. So they're getting interviewed over and over and over again. So I want kids to try to find a way to use this medium, right? Zoom and the ability to record these as a way to add to their skills. The communication thing is such a rough thing. Kids as a whole generally struggle talking to adults, even when they feel comfortable. It's just such a foreign conversation a lot of the time that creates some discomfort. So I want to make sure that they are willing to kind of stretch their legs a little bit in that respect. A little more structured about which entries that we have scattered throughout and the way to build those. It's instead of handing them an entire box of parts and say, put it together, let's put a couple parts together first and then build that into another piece, so it in teacher speak, that's called scaffolding, right? You're building it as you go to kind of create something that stands up at the end.
I think I'm so happy to hear everything you're saying. I just think this is awesome. Because you're absolutely correct. In my experience, kids don't communicate all that great with adults sometimes. And for example, in my I'm the PA announcer for the Wenatchee Apple Sox baseball team. And this summer we had a Wenatchee High School, I think he's a junior this year, as our head scorekeeper. Great kid. Got him to say like 3 words a game.
Right.
Great kid. It's really, we by the end of the season, he was much more comfortable with the adults in the press box, and he's just a great kid, and he loves doing that. He's a stats geek, and I mean that as a complimentary term. Not he loves baseball stats,
right?
But first few games, man, he was just couldn't just at the score sheet on the computer, keeping everything going. But I think that having them learn how to reach out to and handle no because you will be told, or they won't respond, and you can't take it personally. All right. So I think what you're doing is awesome. I do think both the episodes that I listened to, you've listened to them well, so I can say we, but I listened to both of them are great.
Yeah.
I'm very, very happy, but I'm going to turn the attention back onto you just a little bit now. I always ask my guests 3 questions. And so here's first of 3. And I don't remember I kind of prepped you with 2 of them, I think, but I don't remember your answer. Are you a coffee drinker?
No, I forget which 3 you asked me, but no, I'm not a coffee drinker.
All right. So you're going to have to play along then.
Okay.
If you and I were going to go grab a cup of coffee, and I'm making air quotes around coffee together in Wenatchee, where would you recommend we go?
Oh man, my daughter and my wife, and actually my son, love coffee. So I'm going off of their recommendations.
Okay, that's fine.
But if you're just talking about like going to have a conversation, at a place that serves beverages or coffee.
Yeah, go with that.
My daughter loves going to Mela.
Okay.
She loves their coffee. Java Dog is their go-to, but I mean, those aren't places you go. That's drive-throughs.
Right, those are drive-throughs. But Mela's got to sit down downtown. Okay.
Yeah, it's got a good vibe, and I know my students tend to like to go there and stretch their legs a little bit and maybe study a little bit there. And
see, I would have thought your students would be Dutch bros. That's coffee. That's just
that's
I'm not sure what it is, to be honest with you, but
anyway. Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm going to refrain from making any comments about those kids.
So second question is, where's a great place, in your opinion, where's a great place in Wenatchee to go grab lunch?
Oh man. Well, I can tell you that, doing this as long as I've done it, you end up having some connections and some people, so Sweetwood Barbecue, it's a great story. Our former, cafeteria manager, her name was Anitra, and her husband, Tom, on the side had some barbecue as kind of the side hustle for a while. She retired from here, and he and her opened up Country Boys in Cashmere.
Right.
So their son, Benj, opened up Sweetwood Barbecue later on. Benj's wife owns and operates Dilly Deli right next door.
Right next door.
So I've seen a few recipes from the old high school cafeteria mom make their way into a couple of those establishments. But man, I wouldn't say that I was a guy that grew up loving barbecue that we kind of know as barbecue. But during the pandemic, Sweetwood was open for pickup.
Yep.
And I became an addict. I guess is the only way to say this. Is like it's just so good, and I'm really excited that it's a former student and athlete that I helped coach it. And
did you coach Benj?
I wasn't his position coach, but I was a assistant coach when he was on the team. Yeah,
he's such a great guy.
Yeah, and I haven't really seen him a whole lot, but I have students who work there.
Okay.
So they'll come in and I have some pictures on the wall, the old football teams, and they'll go to look for him. But I definitely, when people come into town, like, hey, what do I want to try? I'm like, you got to go to Sweetwood. You got to have lunch, get a sandwich or a salad at Dilly Deli. Get the smoked chicken at Dilly Deli because it's the pulled chicken from leftover from the thighs the night before. And when people say, I don't really like barbecue, I'm like, just trust me, just go, All
right. 2 questions. What's your go-to meal at Sweetwood?
Man, if it's a Wednesday, I don't know if I've ever had a better burger than their smash burger on Wednesdays. So
they're solid. They're really
and I could
solid.
just eat the burger. I mean, that's
Yeah.
good enough right there. But I have not had anything on the menu that isn't worth not going back for.
So you have connections. So I got to ask you. Now, this is why having a podcaster is awesome, because I had no clue that you knew these people.
Yeah.
The thing that I miss from Country Boys is their potato chips.
Yeah, I didn't make it out there as much.
Those were just,
but the times that I went there, I'd get them and they were good.
they were, and I'm not a huge like potato chip fan,
Right.
but those were so good. So I'm going to ask you to use your pull, and you need to talk to Benj and have him put the potato chips on the menu.
I don't know if I have that kind of pull, but
come
definitely
on. Don't underestimate yourself. I mean, you and I will both walk in there together. We'll scare them. How about that?
Well, whatever we can do to help promote business to send down to those two places. I love that they're locally owned, and they employ local kids, and the kids. Oh man, and it's just good food. It's wholesome.
Sweetwood was a
handmade.
Sweetwood was a sponsor of the Apple Sox this year. They actually fed the players for some games. Benj was is just a great guy to talk to. Every time I go in there, no matter how busy they are, good service. I love all of that. Okay. Yep. So this is fun, because normally the guests are saying, "Oh, I go there," and I'm like, "Oh, that sounds fun." I'm looking at my watch. I'm thinking maybe my wife and I are going to go to Sweetwood tonight. Thank you for doing this. Okay. So I have two questions, but the last one is, what didn't I ask you that I should have asked you?
Yeah, that's a great job interview question, right?
I know. What about the program didn't we touch on that you would like to share with the public? Did we miss something?
Oh man, this is really the first time that I've had an opportunity to talk about it publicly. So I appreciate the fact that you're giving me an opportunity to share the insights of what we're trying to do for the program. But so everything we talked about is new and interesting. I've coupled it this year. You read it at the beginning, media production. So we have another side of it where we're trying to get some video production going, where we kind of produce a newscast that's a little more traditional than for our morning announcements, that can be more consistent.
Okay.
So it's not just podcasting, it's also, we got some video production, and we have some sound booths that we have purchased that we were able to get some funding for.
Oh, wow.
The guys from NCW Life, our local television channel, they've been fantastic about coming up and helping us just set up some acoustics and how to get the cameras and the components set up right, because I'm an incredible novice, but I have a former student who is a phenomenal journalist and he's currently stationed in Houston, works for one of the stations there. His name's Bryce Newberry. He went to Arizona State and graduated the Cronkite School of Journalism there. So I have him taking pictures, and I'll ask him technical questions, and he sends me pictures of their sets and their lighting setup. And when I don't know the verbiage for certain things, he's been super generous. And he's an incredibly busy journalist himself. So that helps me when the kids can see this guy's kind of doing some stuff that we're trying to shoot for.
Mm-hmm.
But as for what you haven't asked me, I think those are all the things. Everything that you've talked to me tonight or today about is stuff that is new for me to share.
Good. Well, once again, kudos to this. All right.
Thank you.
So we're going to wrap this up. This is a very simple question. I ask all my guests this question. You have to answer it, and you have to explain your answer. All right. Yeah. It's very, very simple. Cake or pie, and why?
For me, I like pie.
Okay.
And I like pie because I like the texture and kind of the cake. To me, can be overly sweet, especially if the frosting's not done right. Mm-hmm. Pie, I like the crunch, the texture with the sweet and the savory kind of mix of the crust and the fruit. So there we go.
What type of pie?
Man, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Now you're in Wenatchee. The stock answer, you could have just said apple, and no one would question you. But
I'm not. My wife, I was like, Don't buy the Costco apple pie. I'll murder the whole thing and feel miserable about myself for a week. But I really like a mixed berry, kind of a cobbler kind of crust. The oatmeal cracker crust.
Right.
It's got that's the kind of go-to. My mom makes a little bit of a cobbler kind of like that, but
solid.
Yeah,
solid.
There we go. It's a good question,
but there's no wrong answer here either.
No.
But it's really funny to me. I've recorded multiple episodes today, and it's funny to me to watch people's response. Some people are like instantly, cake, pie, and they're just adamant, like that's the right answer. And then there's other people are like, I can't decide, and you would think I'm asking them to choose what hand they're going to cut off.
Yeah,
and then there's people who are like, well, can't I have both? But somebody asked me a question, and no one's asked me this pushback question, and that is, what do most of my guests pick? And I've got to go through, and we're going to go through it now and listen to the episodes and go, and I'm going to start publishing the results.
Tally.
We'll have it like an election results or something. I would say this is my unofficial thing, is that pie is in the lead. I think pie overall is a winner. And then if we're going to dive down a little bit further, I think apple's probably going to be the dominant of that. But cake isn't out of the running by any stretch of the imagination. It's just
never is.
It's never is. So if people want to find out, now I don't know with you, normally I ask my guests this too, but I don't know with you if we do, but if people want to find out more about what's going on at Wenatchee High School, what's going on in your program or anything like that, where can we send them?
Oh, well, simple email to me at harle.b@wenatcheeschools.org. I'd be happy to share more information. While I haven't had a lot of interview requests like what you're asking me to do, I've had a couple of emails from people asking me, tell me more about what you're doing there. We're thinking about trying to do something like that too. So okay. I'm happy to pass on what we've tried to start and where we're still going and what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Well, continued success. I think thank you for taking the time, but I really think what you're doing is outstanding. And
thank you.
I'm really glad that you're doing it.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate you reaching out to me and let me do this.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. I'm glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.